The bad news is that there is much more to queering than just simply the way the problem presents itself. And one of the things that I think it's really important to realize is that the reason why this has spread so fast in so many places isn't just simply because of the surreptitious activities of various NGOs who've been working behind the scenes in the way that Kate explained. There's also a society and a culture that's very hospitable to many of the ideals and the objectives of what queer theory, what queering is all about. I think that's something that we often overlook, and we forget the fact that if society hadn't been such a fertile terrain for queering, it wouldn't have spread so much. And certainly we would not have lost at least 3 generations of young people to many of the ideals that this outlook represents, where it's become very fashionable to be like that. I think it's also important to realize that the language that's used is very specific. So there was a time when transgression actually meant transgression. It actually meant you rebelled, you challenged something. Transgression today is a kind of conformism, where everybody is told to transgress, to break boundaries. Breaking boundaries is no longer something you do once in a while in your life as a rebel. It's something that is expected of you. If you want to be a cool kid, if you want to be, sort of fashionable, then being a boundary breaker is the way you move forward. And there are very few boundaries that are left that have become inviolable. I think it's important to realize the cultural depths of what we're seeing. And I know it's quite tempting to laugh at all the examples that James gave us earlier on, because they are so ridiculous. But it isn't really a laughing matter. It is a deadly serious matter. And a lot of my friends just laugh at this. And they don't realize that while they're laughing, the carpet is being pulled under their feet. Young generations are being directed in the most horrible ways. And something corrosive is happening to our way of life, where, as the speaker before me said, the idea of there being clear spaces for certain kinds of people, whilst another space exists for other kinds of people, is gradually called into question because it's wrong to have a boundary between these 2 domains of our experience. Just look at the way the world works, right? Not only is the biological distinction, which has existed for thousands of years between men and women, are now questioned, and anybody that upholds that distinction is seen as old-fashioned and somehow illiterate because they're not coming to terms with the new boundaries that have been undone. So too, every single boundary that's been essential for civilization is now called into question. One of the things that bothers me more than anything in relation to this discussion, as well as other discussions, is the way that the boundary between children and adults is gradually undermined quite systematically. And where you have the adultification of children being treated like as if they're little adults, alongside the infantilization of adults, because the 2 go hand in hand. Right? That essential boundary, which is essential for adults to take care of children, to be responsible for them and for their upbringing, is gradually whittled away, undermined. Look at the distinction that was mentioned earlier on, I think it was by James, about the way in which the age-old civilizational boundary between humans and animals is now seen as it's so old-fashioned. You're so incorrigible to imagine that somehow the moral status of human beings is particularly special, and you're being speciesist for not understanding that animals too are able to give consent. And there's now actually several journals that are now published in the academic world that argue for the giving of consent for animals. And they actually believe that any kind of sexual relationship between humans and animals is more or less done by equals. Right? And when you look at these journal articles, what I found absolutely nauseating as an academic is the words they use. I mean, they do sound extremely academic. They invented this new vocabulary, which they're kind of putting forward, where essentially it seems like this is a very scientific, thoughtful, reflective worldview. But that's not all, because once these ideals have been confirmed, validated, academically approved, then gradually they seep outwards. And gradually they begin to influence the media, they begin to influence culture, and even people who are not really interested in this begin to understand that unless they sign up and accept this new worldview, they will be ostracized. And just think of all the many people in your life that think exactly the way that most people in this panel think, and yet are too scared to open their mouth. They really are scared to make their views felt because they feel that if they do that, they will be seen as uncaring, they will be seen as prejudiced. And when you have a situation where self-censorship on these issues is so prevalent, then it means that we lost half the battle, right? It means that we lost half the battle because people are too scared to say what they know to be true. People are too scared to challenge this new kind of conformism. So what I'm really arguing is that according to my analysis, what's at stake here is not just simply the activities of certain NGOs like Stonewall, but our culture underneath it all, the fertile terrain that our culture has created for the breaking of boundaries, for calling into question the legacy of various civilizational accomplishments, because it's this cultural terrain on which something like queering can flourish that creates the problem for us in the long run. Because even if the word queering no longer existed, there would be something like that was trying and striving towards the same kinds of ends. And this is something that isn't just simply a problem for gay and lesbian people, it's a problem for heterosexuals as well. It's actually a problem for humanity. Because at the end of the day, queering to me is another word for dehumanization. Thank you.